fun. I know this embarrasses moms, but y'all deserve it. If you are a mom or if you're a grandmother here today, would you stand up and just let us honor you? Go ahead. Can we give these ladies a round of applause? You guys are rock stars. Okay, you can go ahead and take a seat. My name is Trish Davis. As Justin said, I'm one of the pastors here, and we know that there are a million places you could be this morning, and we are so honored that you would choose to be with us. We know that today, Mother's Day, for many of you, you've got plans, you're excited, you're not even listening to me because you're thinking about lunch that your mom's making. But I want to just take a moment to honor those of you in this room to know that Mother's Day, maybe for you, isn't a day that's celebratory. Maybe for you, Mother's Day brings about a quiet pain of a mother who's no longer alive. Maybe for some of you in this room, Mother's Day is that painful reminder where you kind of feel like it's in your face that not only do you not have children, but you're single, and you feel the weight of that. Maybe for you, it is a child that has been lost through a miscarriage, a failed adoption. I know in this room there are heavy hearts, and I just want you to know that this place, Hope City, is a safe place to be exactly where you're at. And so if you are in a place of joy and celebration, we welcome you. If you're in a place of hardship and struggle, know that this is exactly where we'd hope you to be. And so here's my goal for us this morning. I know many of you, like the guys and some of our teenagers, are like, oh my gosh, 30 minutes of motherhood. Pluck my eyes out now, right? It's cool, I get it. But I hope that you would lean in, because this is what I know to be true about God, is that he can use any topic for his word to speak truth over your life. And so my prayer is that you will lean in together and trust that God will meet you this morning exactly where you're at. For those of you who are new to Hope City, Justin and I, we've been married for almost 22 years. And that's when you're supposed to be like, what? And nobody ever does anymore. It's just so depressing. Give me something. But Justin and I, we have 3 boys, awesome boys. Our oldest, Micah, he is just finished his sophomore year of college, which is totally trippy. I seriously think I pop a wrinkle every time I just speak those words out. And then my middle son, Elijah, I can't really talk about him. He was in that video saying those sweet words that I paid him lots of money to say. He's getting ready to graduate from high school, which is... we'll talk about that later. And then my youngest son, Isaiah, he is who we call our gentle giant. And those of you, you can't miss him. He stands, I think, 6'5" now. He's ginormous. So I have no little people in my house. But when I first began to be a mom, Justin and I had been married less than a year. In fact, we were married for 4 months. We were living at college, finishing our degrees. We got married, and then 4 months later found out I was expecting. So I went from college life to married life to mom life within a year. And when Micah came 5 days after our first year anniversary, y'all, we were still trying to figure out how to share a bathroom, let alone share a baby. We had no idea what we were doing. And so when you had babies in the 90s, it was before you could Google things. And so there was this book, this holy book. It was not the Bible. It was this big, fat, audacious, ugly-looking book called What to Expect When You're Expecting. And I read this book from start to finish, and anything it would say, my eyes would get big and be like, wait, what, my body's gonna do what? Just totally freaked me out. I started watching soap operas because people have babies on soap operas. I thought, they could teach me something, right? We could figure this out. And, any material I could read, I would just try and soak it in. And so Micah came screaming into this world 5 days after our first year anniversary, and we brought him home. And I just remember begging the nurses, please come home with me. I really don't know what I'm doing. And they didn't come. And so for the next couple of weeks, what people don't often know is that when you have a baby, all of your family comes, right? And they love on you, and they dote on that baby, and they cook for you, they clean for you, and then they leave. they like just disappear and you are left unto yourself with this baby. And so a couple of weeks had gone by and Micah was super colicky. I could not figure out like how to console him. And this one day, you just know, and this goes beyond if you're a mom or not, where you wake up and you know today is just going to be a bad day. Like it does not matter what you do to try and change it. It's just a bad day. This was this day. It was a Thursday. And it was the day that Justin, not only did he have to go to work all day, he was a youth pastor, and we made just enough money to be over the poverty line. Like we were broke and newly in ministry, and he had to work all day, and then he had to go to an elders meeting about 20 minutes away from our house, which meant he wasn't coming home. And that day, that child just screamed all day long. And I don't know, I'm sure it's not in that big fat book, but I just got this idea that maybe I could console him in the shower. So I would take him in the shower and let the warm water just like go over him and he would calm down. And we took about 7 showers that day. I'm not even gonna lie. To the point that I forgot I had put makeup on. I had raccoon face and from my mascara. And then I had this robe on that I decided I'm just not even gonna get dressed because that way I'm like ready for the shower. So about 6 o'clock, I'm undone. I am undone. I'm ready to tear that How to Have a Baby book in half, and I want to bust a hole through my TV. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I called Justin in tears. I'm like, I need you to come home now. Like he's broken and I can't fix him. And he's like, oh, okay, baby. I didn't know these things like postpartum. I had no idea that I was struggling with postpartum. So everything felt hard. Nursing was harder than they made it look in those magazines. Finances were harder. They were tighter because I was like, good night, child. How many diapers do you need in a week? It was like, where is it all coming from? You know, money was tight. And then even intimacy, which the kids are like, oh my gosh, what is she talking about? I mean, like the kids they come from somebody, like we need to go there. But like it became more of a burden than a holy union. And so this moment where I have to call Justin, I am at the lowest of lows. And I call him, he can hear Micah screaming in the background, and I said, I need you to come home. He's like, okay, I'm there. And I knew he was 20 minutes away, so imagine my surprise 10 minutes later when there's a knock at our door. And I peer out like the window and I realize there's an ambulance. And we had a neighbor, she lived above us in our apartment building, her name was Loopy, and she fell all the time. Her name kind of preceded her. She was like, Loopy. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, Loopy has fallen and they're at the wrong door. So I bring the door wide open and standing there. Now, mind you, I am 21 years old, half dressed with just a robe on, with an infant screaming. And there before me were 2 EMTs, and one was young and very good looking. And the other one was middle-aged. And maybe he was good looking, but I was just into the young one thinking, oh my gosh, I am half naked in front of this person. And they said, I said, you've got the wrong place. And the younger EMT is like, are you Trisha Davis? And I'm like, yes, I am. And he said, well, your husband got pulled over on the way home, and he proceeded to tell the officer that there was a medical emergency, that you needed an ambulance. And I said, well, I don't need an ambulance right now, but when he gets home, we will have a medical emergency. And so they come inside, Micah is screaming, and I sit down on the table pretty defeated. And the older middle-aged gentleman, who I'm sure was a daddy, grabs Micah. And within seconds, this child is just fast asleep. And I remember kind of having my hands on the table with my head low, and that very kind EMT put his hand on top of my hand, and he said, you know what the best thing you can do for this child is just to take a deep breath and believe in yourself. And in a moment that was meant for like compassion and mercy and encouragement, was the first moment that I remember that this guilt washed over me. This fear of, oh my gosh, like I'm not enough to be this child's mom. Like I'm too young. We don't have enough money. Like, God, you chose the wrong person because I don't know what I'm doing. Have you ever been in a place where fear and guilt so overwhelm you that it robs you of your joy? You see, when fear and guilt come over you, everything is wrong. Everything feels like out of control. As moms especially, we feel guilty about everything. We feel guilty that we work full time and we actually like our jobs, right? We feel guilty that we're stay-at-home moms and we homeschool. Like we're those people. And people are like, oh, well, if you homeschool, your house should be so clean all the time. They forget if you work full time, you're never home to clean your house. If you stay home full time, there are children trashing out your house all the time. It's a lose-lose, right? But we feel guilt, and then out of that guilt, we fear that people will judge us. We fear that we're not gonna be enough. And when fear and guilt keeps us in this never-ending struggle of not being enough, it robs us of joy. In those early years of being a mom, I just remember being joyless because I never felt like I was enough. But look what it says in Romans chapter 3, verse 22. It says, we are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are. This word is for everybody in the room. Regardless if you are single, married, single again, married again, if whatever, children, no children, he says that we are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus. In other words, he's saying, when you trust me, I make you enough. And I love that line. It says, no matter who you are. When guilt says you never measure up, God says, not on my watch. You're enough. But here's the deal. As mothers, motherhood isn't this lifelong sentence of self-inflicted guilt and fear. Motherhood is a gift to express God-given love. God has not brought you into motherhood so that you wake up every day feeling like you're not enough. That your circumstances negate the truth of this love that you have for your children. He's saying, man, motherhood is an opportunity to experience love in a way that absolutely blows your mind. I don't know if you've ever read God's word and you open up a passage and it hits you in a way that it was never intended for. And I started reading this passage. This makes me sound so bad, but it's a famous passage in 1 Corinthians that love is. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4-7, it says, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. And I thought, oh my gosh, my children are going to say this about me when I'm gone to heaven. They're going to say, my mom, she was always patient. My mom, she was always kind. She was never proud. She was never self-seeking. She definitely was never easily angered, right? It always protects. And what I love about this passage is that the Bible talks about love all throughout from start to finish. And there's 3 types of love throughout the Greek and the Hebrew. There's this eros, which is kind of like this romantic love. And then you have philo, which it's like a brotherly love. But the love that's being expressed in this passage is agape. And agape, think about it as it's an ultimate love. It's a sacrificial love. In other words, it's going to cost you something. And I was thinking about this passage. I'm like, man, I really hope my kids think this about me. And then I started thinking through 20 years of motherhood and realized the times that I wasn't kind, like that one time that Micah and I were in a text message fight, because this is how you fight with your kids now. And I was texting Justin at the same time, and as we talked about cussing last week, I'm not going to tell you later where I get that from, but I may have sent an inappropriate text to Justin about how angry I was at Micah, and then I sent it to Micah, and his response was, nice, Mom. So not so kind there. There was a time where I wasn't very patient. Our middle son, Elijah, those of you who know him know that he loves to talk now. He's a great communicator, but when he was 3 years old, he had no speech. And so he said, for mom, and he said, red. He had his own language that we learned, but nobody else could understand him. And so we lived in Nashville, Tennessee at the time, and we would drive 30 minutes to downtown Nashville for him to get speech therapy. And every day, every day there was this part in our journey as we drove into the city that Elijah would see something and he would scream out, Akbak, Akbak, over and over again. And I, for the life of me, could not figure it out. When it first happened, I felt compassion and I felt sad that I didn't know what he was saying. And he would just cry these hot tears. He was so angry with me because he knew what he was saying. He didn't understand what I didn't understand him. And so eventually, like week 6 of this, every time we passed this route, I was not kind. I was not patient. And I remember just crying myself saying, Lord, help me figure out what this child is looking at. And I was always looking up, trying to see. And then one day I had turned just straight, even with my eyesight. And I saw there was this little teeny tiny, tucked in between these large buildings, a little tiny fire station that an old school fire truck was in. And when I saw it, I said, fire truck, fire truck. And this child, his chest rose like, yes, this woman understands me. It's amazing. And then he just fell into his seat with this sigh of being known and loved. Or then there was the time when my girlfriend, Jenny Clayville, she's crazy. We call her the crazy Asian. It's her name, not ours, that she's given to herself because she is crazy. And she's this tiny little petite thing. And we decided when she came into town, we were going to take the kids to school. And so they were in middle school at the time, which middle schoolers love when their parents say goodbye to them in front of all of their friends. And so Jenny gets this idea that we're going to be awesome. And we drop Elijah and Micah off. Micah is in 8th grade, I believe, or 7th grade. And Elijah's like in 5th or 6th. So they get out of the car. Micah's my very serious child. Elijah's like, whatever. So they're just yin and yang when they go to school. Well, Jenny rolls down the window and she starts screaming at them. You better get to school. I will beat you if you don't do what I say. Like she's saying all of these crazy head things. And Micah is white. Like he is like, what is she doing? Elijah's like, oh my gosh, Jenny, you're so funny. And I was being an awesome, compassionate, kind mom by just laughing the whole time. I didn't stop or anything. So instead of telling you stories about all of the ways that I'm not living out 1 Corinthians, I want to take a look at a familiar woman in the Bible that I believe gives us these incredible examples. These moments in her life in parenting where she has to choose between living a life of guilt and fear, or choose to know that God has created her to be uniquely and perfectly enough. It's the story that if you've been to church, especially at Christmas, you've heard it ad nauseum. The story of Gabriel, the angel, coming to Mary and sharing with her this good news that she's going to be pregnant with child. And so we pick up the story in Luke chapter 1, verse 28. It says this: Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman. The Lord is with you." Now, I just want to take a time out. This is just not about anything, but like when we read this passage, Gabriel is often, he's spoken about throughout Scripture, and I'm sure he's like this regal angel. But when I read this passage, I just envision Gabriel being Chris Rock and him saying, "Greetings, favored woman. The Lord is with you." I mean, can you just picture it? I don't know why. I probably need to go to counseling. I just think Chris Rock would say it so much better than Gabriel. And so in verse 29, it says, confused and disturbed, hello, Mary tried to think of what the angel could mean. "Don't be afraid, Mary," the angel told her, "for you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus." And I love how Mary responds. Oh my gosh, in the church, we just love to put bows around things. And we read this passage like she's so ooey gooey, like, yes, angel. Like, this is all gonna work out. And she says, Mary asked the angel, "But how can this happen? I'm a virgin." What I think she really said was, hold up, listen. And me and my man, we ain't married yet. Like, you got the wrong girl. Like, I am too young. I come from a humble village. Like, if people found out I was pregnant, it would be cray-cray around here. Like, you got the wrong person. Immediately, the angel says, "Don't be afraid." Why? Because Mary felt fearful. In a moment of fear, the guilt overwhelmed her. Like, God, you chose the wrong person. But then we see in verse 38, she just simply says, "Let it be." That she chose to push past the feeling of not being enough. And she trusted that God would be enough. You see, love drives out fear and restores our trust in God. When we allow that sacrificial love, that agape love, to drive out fear, we lean into God. We choose to trust him. And so my question to you is, regardless of what season of life you're in, where do you find yourself riddled with guilt? Where do you wake up and feel like, I'm just never going to be enough in this area? Maybe for you it's a job. Maybe for you it's a relationship. Maybe for you it's a dream that feels like it's been delayed and maybe will never happen. Where do you feel that you're not enough? This second significant moment is one of my favorites with Mary because it makes me feel so good as a mom. I know you guys are going to think so awful of me, but think about it. Jesus was fully human and fully God. Can you imagine parenting him? I mean, I just can't wrap my mind around it. I want you to picture Christmas Day with your whole extended family, all of them. My mom and my brother and my pops are here, and they're looking at me like, who are we inviting? Who's in this? All of them. They're all coming. Imagine all of them there, and that either like elicited this warm, fuzzy feeling or complete panic. Like you're already sweating. Like I can't even imagine. Imagine all of your extended family, Christmas Day, and then you all decide every year that you are going to take a trip together that takes 2 to 5 days on foot and on donkeys. Doesn't that sound amazing? This is Jesus and Mary's life right now. They are with their whole extended family, and they are going from Nazareth, where they live, to travel to Jerusalem to celebrate the yearly remembrance of the Passover. And the Passover was it was something that was celebrated every year to remember how God redeemed his people out of slavery, out of Egypt. It would last a whole week. It was full of celebration. And so the celebration is over, and they return home. The Bible says that they walked and journeyed on their donkeys a whole day. And then all of a sudden, they realize that Jesus is MIA. Like, they have no idea where he is. Moms, on your worst day, Mary lost Jesus. Like, Mary lost the Son of God. You're good. Like, you cannot go downhill more than that. And not just for an hour, not for an afternoon, but for a whole day. And so we pick up the story in Luke chapter 2, verse 46. It says, the next day. Okay, let's just be honest. After 22 years of marriage, this isn't in the Bible, but you know it happened. I see them like talking, Mary and Joseph, on their donkeys and going, where's Jesus? I don't know, where's Jesus? They get off their donkeys and then they go through all of their family. Have you seen him? Have you seen him? And then they meet at the end of the pack and they look at each other and in unison they say, it's your fault, right? And this big fight ensues. And so then they fight on their donkeys all the way to find Jesus. It's not in the Bible, but I know that it happened. Okay, back to the story. The next day they found him in the temple, Jesus, seated among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. The teachers were quite taken with him, impressed with the sharpness of his answers. Now, this is important. Like, Jesus isn't just sitting with some, nobodies. He was sitting with the elite religious leaders. These would be men who knew the Torah, the Old Testament. They would know it orally. They would know every facet of it. And so the fact that this 12-year-old boy is impressing him, it's a big deal. Jesus, as a 12-year-old boy, is stepping into his ministry. But then I love what happens next. It says, but his parents were not impressed with them. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, everybody's like praising someone, you're like, ugh, I'm not feeling it. Like, this is Mary and Joseph. Not only are they upset, they are hurt. His mother said, young man, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been half out of our minds looking for you. He said, why were you looking for me? Didn't you know that I had to be here dealing with the things of my father? But they had no idea what he was talking about. And why I love this passage so much is if you have teenagers, not only did she lose Jesus, she didn't understand what he's saying. Like, that's the life of raising teenagers. I love it. That's a side note. That's free. Okay, verse 51. So he went back to Nazareth with them and lived obediently with them. His mother held these things dearly deep within herself. Have you ever come to a moment where you feel like you are absolutely coming undone? That you are coming unglued? As Mary says in this text, just half out of your mind. That no matter what you do, you just can't seem to find your joy. And if I'm honest with you, if I was asked to speak on Mother's Day 2 years ago, Mother's Day 2015, I would have had to kindly decline because I was in no shape to talk about motherhood. That couple of months leading up to that Mother's Day weekend, we had made the decision as a family to move back to Indianapolis to start Hope City. And at the time, my oldest was getting ready to graduate from high school. And my middle son was a sophomore in high school. And the guilt and the fear of moving him halfway through his high school career, it was soul crushing. And then my youngest was in middle school. Some of the toughest times are in middle school. And I was going to move him in the middle of his middle school career. I mean, who does that? And then here, Mother's Day was the countdown to my oldest graduating from high school, and we were so proud of him because he got a scholarship to play college ball, but that meant he would graduate from high school on a Sunday, and he would leave for school the next day. And nobody prepared me for how difficult it is to launch your children. Elijah's getting ready to graduate in about 3-4 weeks, and I can't talk about it because it's still really hard. And I remember calling my mom. Y'all, my mom, I love her so much. Give her a hand. She really likes attention. So would you just, that just makes her day. She's so funny. There's so much I love about my mom. She loves Jesus. She does. But she likes to cuss. And so, you know where I get it from. I'm sorry. She's worked downtown Chicago for 30 years, so I think she deserves to cuss whenever she wants. And so my oldest sister, Julie, and my younger brother, Frankie, who's here today, sometimes we like to get her wound up to see what she'll say, because it's so funny. I know we're awful children, but it's so funny when she gets going. I love it. And so this particular day, I was just having a really bad weekend, knowing Mother's Day was coming up, knowing that everything felt out of control. Like everything was about to change and I didn't know how to handle it. And so I was hoping when I called her, I would get cussing mama. Like she would just get mad with me and she would be like, and I'm like, yeah, like, get it, mom. And so I call her and instead of getting cussing mama, I got Jesus mama. And I was like, dang it. And she just spoke such truth into my life. And she just said, sacrificial love, that pain that you feel, I often feel even now that you're well into adulthood. That sacrificial love is choosing to let go because you got to make a choice that if you're either going to guilt your children into this next season of life or you're going to free them to step into who God's called them to be. And I believe that this moment between Jesus and Mary, this is their moment. Their moment of feeling like things are about to change. That a DTR is taking place, that they're defining the relationship, that Mary was able to almost live in this place of pretending that she had Jesus as her son, but now as a 12-year-old, he's starting to break through and she realizes in this moment, life is about to change. Mary, just like us mamas, need this reminder that our role as mothers is to sacrificially love our children into their calling. Love them to eventually let go and let God. You see, letting go of control and embracing the messiness of life gives way to sustaining joy and peace. That peace and joy overflow when you give control away. When you allow sacrificial love to reign, life changes. It's a joy that you live with. It's a peace that's sustained. And so what in your life do you struggle to control? Your kids, your jobs, your relationship? What if you chose to let go and trusted God? My mother-in-law is here this morning as well, and she has she's been such a witness to me of how to love in the messiness of life. I've seen her sacrificially love her adult children after a divorce of 36 years. I've seen her use her pain as her greatest calling, and in that came around her children to launch them in theirs. That when you let go of control. See, oftentimes in the church, we think that God loves us when we have it all figured out. When Jesus says, I love you in the mess. I love you here in the now, that you are enough. The last moment we see that we experience that is a defining moment for Mary is one that as a parent, I have a really hard time wrapping my mind around. It's this moment where Jesus is now an adult and she's got to experience, could you imagine your child turning water into wine? I would want a sticker to be like, my son's so amazing, your son will never beat mine, right? He's got skills. It's pretty amazing. That Jesus starts doing ministry and miracle after miracle, and Mary experiences heaven touching earth. Can you imagine that she played a part in that? And then this moment is different. This moment, Friday has happened, and she hears word that Jesus has been taken, her son, her beloved, has been taken into custody. And she goes and she finds him, and she looks for him. She searches. And then she comes up onto the scene where her son is being beaten. He's being screamed at. There are mobs of people wanting him. That a crown of thorns is being placed on his head, and she is helpless in the crowd to do nothing about it. And I wonder the pain and the guilt of not being able to protect her son in that moment. And then she stays with him. She stays with him as he picks up his cross and carries it to which she knows will be his ultimate death. And as he hung on the cross, she sits at his feet. And I wonder in that moment if her mind went back to the place of the manger, of remembering him being swaddled in clothes, being swaddled in cloth, and bringing that baby fresh onto her chest, and the smell of heaven still on his skin. I wonder when she was at the foot of the cross if she remembered that day where he was 12 years old, and she didn't even care that he was in trouble. She was just so thankful he was found. The joy of what was lost being found, and how that day she knew her 12-year-old would change the world. And now in this moment, she's at the foot of the cross and she's looking up at her son, barely clinging to her life. And I wonder if guilt and shame overwhelmed her. That she thought, all this time, I wasn't enough. But then Jesus. Story picks up in John chapter 19, verse 23. It says, while the soldiers were looking after themselves, this is an indication that the soldiers were not at the foot of the cross. They have stepped aside to take care of themselves. So this picture at the foot of the cross is Jesus' mother, his aunt, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene, stood at the foot of the cross. Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing near her. He says to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that moment, the disciple accepted her as her own mother. This picture, Jesus is barely hanging on to his life. He's hanging on a cross and he sees the love, the sacrificial love of a mom, and now the sacrificial love of a son, a mom who brought him into the world and a son who was about to save it. And he whispers to her, "You were enough. You were enough. The disciple whom I love, he's going to got your back. He's going to take care of you." You see, love always protects. Love always trusts. Love always hopes. It always perseveres. And Mary faithfully persevered even when she didn't understand. See, perseverance paves the way to love in moments we don't understand. Perseverance pushes through to that love in moments that we don't know the miracle that's on the other side. Even in moments when you struggle to trust, even in moments where you feel like you're being judged, even in moments where the political climate feels like it's tearing our society apart, even in moments where the racial divide is still stronger than it was even 30 years ago, even in those moments, God says, I am enough. You can trust me. You see, love calls us to never give up, even when we don't understand. The cross is the call to never give up because God never gave up on you. Jesus died to set you free. You were made enough through him, no matter the circumstances. And because of it, it is well. It is well because you are loved. It is well because Jesus says to his mom, he says to me, he says to you, that you were chosen, you were bought with a price. That the circumstances of this world, although they are hard, they can never negate the truth of who God is. It is well. It is well because the cross says that death, guilt, and fear have been defeated. It is well. So what if? What if we became a generation, a people, a men, women, moms, dads, sisters, and brothers who decided to say, no matter what, it is well. Let's pray.